The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of something shifting. Zane stood in the shadows, his senses alive, but his mind at war. There was a pull, a force he couldn't ignore, but he didn't want to acknowledge it. His wolf paced uneasily, urging him to follow, to seek. But Zane wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. He had a duty, a responsibility. It was insane, really, to even think about it. He had been raised on the belief that his fated mate would be someone strong, someone with a bloodline to restore his pack. Not someone like her. Delilah. Human. He barely knew her. Passing encounter. But it was enough. Enough to leave him questioning everything he thought he knew. She didn't belong here. Not in his world of shadows and power. Her life was simple, predictable. But what drew him in was the way she looked at him, so unaware of the forces at play around her. She didn't know. Not yet. Her world was a far cry from his. A world of mundane routines, of light and normality, untouched by the darkness that ran through his veins. How could someone like her, so innocent, so full of life, be caught in his web? And yet, every time their paths crossed, it was as if fate itself was pushing them together. It was fate. But was it what was fated? Zane let out a frustrated breath. He couldn't get her out of his mind, couldn't ignore the pull, no matter how much he wanted to. Delilah had no idea what she was getting into. He had tried to push her away, to protect her from the truth, but there was something about her that wouldn't let him go. His pack. Their survival. All of it rested on him finding the one. The fated mate who would bring them back from the brink of extinction. But was Delilah the answer, or was she a complication? He thought back to the last time he saw her. Her smile, her laughter, so untainted by the weight of the world he carried on his shoulders. The way she had looked at him, as if he were a normal man. But nothing about Zane was normal. And nothing about this situation was either. His wolf growled inside him, frustrated and restless. Zane had tried to ignore it, tried to convince himself that his feelings were nothing more than a fleeting distraction. But they were not. The pack was growing weaker. The enemies they had fought for so long were closing in. Time was running out. But as much as Zane told himself he needed to focus, his mind kept drifting back to her. Was she part of the solution? Or was she the reason everything would fall apart? The question gnawed at him, tearing at the edges of his resolve. But the answer wasn't coming. Zane's gaze lingered on the distant city lights. Delilah was out there, unaware, living her life, blissfully ignorant of the storm that was brewing on the horizon. Would she even want to know the truth? Could he live with the consequences of her knowing? Or was the real question, could he live with the consequences of her not knowing? The night had fallen silent, but Zane could feel the hum of the city beneath his feet. It was a rhythm that never ceased, a constant, pulsing heartbeat that both unsettled and grounded him. He had been in this city his entire life, surrounded by humans who had no idea what lay just below the surface, unaware of the hidden world he and his kind inhabited. Zane's footsteps echoed on the sidewalk, but his mind was elsewhere. The pack was in turmoil. He could sense it, feel it in the air. Tension, whispers, fears that no one dared speak aloud. The wolves were scattered, disjointed, and their strength was dwindling with each passing day. As Alpha, it was his responsibility to hold them together, to make the tough choices. But with every passing hour, those choices became harder to make. The howl that had pierced the night lingered in his ears. It wasn't a sound of victory. It was a warning, a cry from the edges of their territory. His pack was under siege. Zane could feel the pressure mounting, the threat closing in. Rival packs were testing their borders, poking at the weakness they all sensed. The alpha's instincts told him it was only a matter of time before the attack came. The rogues would strike soon. Zane knew this. And yet, in the back of his mind, Delilah's face haunted him. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She shouldn't have any place in his life. But there she was, taking up more and more of his thoughts, stirring a part of him he couldn't name. He needed clarity, and right now his world was full of fog. The city's skyline loomed ahead, the lights blurring in Zane's vision as his senses sharpened. Every movement, every sound, every heartbeat around him rang through his mind. His wolf, always alert, demanded to be let loose, but Zane pushed it down. He needed control. They all needed him to lead them through this. He arrived at the warehouse at the outskirts of the city, a secluded, almost forgotten place. It was their safe house, a place where the pack gathered to plan, strategize, and train. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the low murmur of voices. Zane's presence silenced them. The pack members straightened, shifting uneasily under his gaze. Alpha Derek was there as expected. The older wolf was always the first to show up, his weathered face betraying no emotion, but his eyes spoke volumes. The weight of their situation was heavier on him than anyone else. Zane could feel it. "I see you've heard the news." Derek's gravelly voice broke the silence. His eyes studied Zane, reading him with a sharpness that only comes from years of experience. "The rogues are circling. We need a plan." Zane nodded, his thoughts still clouded by his personal turmoil. "What's the situation on the borders?" "They're testing us, watching our movements. They want us weak. They know we're divided," Derek replied, his tone biting. "We need to act before they take advantage." Zane clenched his fists. He hated the feeling of being vulnerable. The pack had always been a symbol of power, strength. It was his duty to protect them, to lead them through this storm. "They're waiting for the right moment," Zane said, his voice steady, though the fire within him burned brighter. "We can't give them that." Derek nodded, but there was something else in his gaze, a quiet concern that Zane wasn't sure he was ready to face. "Zane," he said carefully, "you need to focus. The pack needs you. We can't afford distractions." Zane's gaze snapped to his alpha. "What are you suggesting?" Derek hesitated. "You've been distracted, son. And it's not just this, it's everything. The wolves are starting to notice. We need you present. All in." Zane clenched his jaw. He knew Derek was right, but the weight of his responsibilities felt like a boulder pressing down on his chest. "I'm here. I'm always here," he growled, trying to shake off the gnawing feeling that something was slipping through his fingers. Derek didn't argue. Instead, he motioned toward the table where a map of their territory was spread out. "We're moving tonight. I've gathered some of the younger wolves. We're making a stand." Zane studied the map for a moment before his gaze drifted toward the window. The night outside was eerily still, as if the world was holding its breath. He could feel the change in the air. Something big was coming, and he needed to be ready for it. "Let's move," Zane said, turning toward the door. As he stepped out into the night, the cold air bit at his skin, but it did nothing to clear his mind. Every step he took felt heavier than the last. The pack needed him, his family, his responsibility. And yet the same thought, the same question kept intruding. Was Delilah part of his world now? Was there any way he could ignore this pull, this connection he couldn't explain? Well, he couldn't afford to. He had to focus. The rogues were out there, and they weren't going to wait for him to get his act together. But the question remained, lurking in the back of his mind. Would saving his pack cost him everything? Zane and the pack moved in the quiet night, their footsteps soft but deliberate. The night had always felt like home to him, the darkness offering a kind of peace that daylight couldn't provide. But tonight it felt heavier. Each breath seemed to carry the weight of the world, and each step he took toward the heart of their territory felt like a step away from everything he had ever known. The night air was cool, and the wind rustled through the trees that lined the outskirts of the city. The city felt distant now, almost like a different world. Zane could still hear its hum in the distance, the noise of human life going on without a care for the things lurking in the shadows, the things that Zane and his pack had to deal with every day. He glanced at his pack, his brothers. Their faces were grim, each of them carrying the same burden he did, the weight of survival, the constant pressure of leadership. They were tired, worn down by the ongoing fight for their existence, and Zane couldn't blame them. Their world was unraveling piece by piece, and they needed a leader who could hold it all together. Zane had always been that leader. But lately, doubts crept in, questions he didn't have answers for. Was he doing enough? Was he the right alpha for this pack, or had he missed something crucial along the way? His thoughts drifted back to Delilah. She had no place in this world. No place in the pack, no place in the darkness they lived in. She was too pure, too untouched by the complexities of their lives. And yet, despite all that, every part of him was drawn to her, like a moth to a flame. The thought unsettled him, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. He had to stay focused. The pack depended on him. His heart may be distracted, but the pack's survival was his duty. They arrived at the training ground, the old abandoned building on the edge of their territory where the pack had set up base. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the wolves grounded. Zane didn't need to say anything. The pack knew their roles, knew the gravity of the situation. They were ready. "Let's get to work," Zane said, his voice low but firm. He turned toward the makeshift map they had drawn on the wall, showing their boundaries and the locations of the rogue pack's movements. "They'll come through here, through the eastern sector. We'll meet them headin'." Derek stood beside him, his eyes scanning the map. "Are you sure about this? We're stretched thin already. We can't afford to take unnecessary risks." Zane's eyes narrowed. "We don't have a choice. If we wait any longer, they'll have us cornered. We fight and we fight now." Derek studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then we'll follow your lead." The wolves began to move into position, their bodies shifting into their animal forms with practiced ease. Zane's wolf paced restlessly within him, eager for the fight, but Zane held it back. He had a job to do, and that meant keeping his head clear. As they set out, Zane's mind raced, not with the usual rush of battle-ready adrenaline, but with the weight of everything at stake. His pack, their survival, Delilah. It all blended together into a whirlwind of uncertainty, and Zane couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened tonight would change everything. The pack moved like shadows, slipping through the streets in perfect silence. Zane led them through the alleyways, their movements synchronized, a well-oiled machine designed to take down their enemies. They were close now. So close. Zane could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't just the rogues who were waiting for the right moment. It was him, Alpha. He was waiting for the right moment too. The right moment to decide what came first, the pack or everything else. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He couldn't afford to hesitate. Not tonight. Not with so much on the line. Suddenly, a sharp howl cut through the night, echoing off the buildings, sending a chill through Zane's spine. The rogues had made their move. Zane signaled for the pack to spread out, moving quickly and quietly through the streets, positioning themselves for the impending clash. The adrenaline kicked in, sharp and cold, and his wolf surged forward, eager for the fight. Zane forced it back again, willing himself to stay in control. They rounded the corner, and there they were. The rogue pack, their eyes glowing with hunger, their scent thick in the air. They were more numerous than Zane had expected, at least twice the size of his pack. And they were waiting, watching, as if they knew exactly when Zane and his wolves would show up. The tension crackled in the air, the unspoken challenge hanging between them. Zane didn't wait for the first move. He lunged forward, his wolf taking over as he shifted, the raw power of the animal overtaking him. His body twisted and shifted in an instant, fur rippling over his skin, claws extended, teeth bared. The battle was brutal, the sound of claws meeting flesh and the howl of wolves echoing in the night. Zane moved through the chaos with precision, his pack following his lead. They were outnumbered, but they had the advantage of experience, of unity. Zane's eyes locked onto the rogue alpha, a massive wolf, larger than any he had ever seen. The rogue alpha growled, a sound that rumbled through the street, challenging Zane. Zane didn't hesitate. With a roar, he leapt, colliding with the rogue alpha in a blur of fur and teeth. The fight was fierce, but Zane's determination burned brighter. He had to win. He couldn't afford to lose. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. And then, in the middle of the fight, something strange happened. Zane felt it. A flicker of something outside the battle, a tug at the edges of his mind, like a whisper in the wind. Delilah. It was as if she were calling to him, pulling at his heart. The moment of distraction was enough. The rogue alpha took advantage of it, his teeth sinking into Zane's side. Pain shot through Zane, but he fought back, pushing through the agony, refusing to let the pain slow him down. With a final brutal strike, Zane plunged his claws into the rogue alpha's throat, ending the fight in a flash of blood and fur. The rest of the rogues scattered, retreating into the shadows from where they had come. Zane stood there, panting heavily, his body battered but not broken. The pack had won. They had held their ground. But as he looked around at the pack members who stood with him, victorious but weary, his heart still felt heavy. The fight wasn't over. This victory didn't change what lay ahead. And the question that had been gnawing at him all night still lingered in the back of his mind. What was the cost of this victory? What would be the price for everything he had yet to face? The streets were quiet again, too quiet. After the battle with the rogue pack, the adrenaline that had fueled Zane's every movement slowly ebbed away, leaving only exhaustion. His body ached, bruised and bloodied from the fight, but it was the weight of something far heavier that lingered in his chest. The city had returned to its usual hum, the distant sound of traffic and muffled voices filling the night air. But Zane couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And in the quiet aftermath, his thoughts returned to one thing: Delilah. The last time they had crossed paths, it had been brief. A fleeting moment that lingered like a question in his mind. What was it about her that called to him so intensely? Why couldn't he ignore the pull between them? Zane's wolf paced restlessly in his mind, the need to connect with her almost overwhelming. But the pack needed him. His duty as alpha came first. Always. And yet, no matter how hard he tried to push her from his thoughts, Delilah remained there, like a shadow that refused to fade. The pack had won tonight, but what if the victory didn't matter? What if the real battle was already inside him? Zane walked through the streets alone, his footsteps echoing in the silence, and for the first time, the weight of his responsibility felt unbearable. The rogues would be back. He knew it. The fight would never truly end, but it was the questions that kept him awake at night that made everything feel impossible. He reached the edge of the city, where the skyline blurred into the darkened horizon. The familiar sights only made him feel more distant. His world, the world of wolves, of power and duty, was beginning to feel too small. Was Delilah a part of this? Did she belong in a world like his? Suddenly his phone buzzed, the vibration sharp and unwelcome in the stillness of the night. It was Marcus. "Zane, you need to get back to the warehouse." "There's been a breach," Marcus said, his voice tight with urgency. "We've got a problem." Zane's heart skipped a beat. What kind of breach? Someone's sniffing around the borders. It's the rogues or worse. I don't know yet. But you need to move. Now. Zane's instincts kicked in. He couldn't afford to hesitate. Not now. He took off running, his muscles screaming in protest, but his mind was already ahead, analyzing the situation. The pack had just won a battle, but now it seemed as though the rogues were preparing for something more devastating. As he reached the warehouse, he found Marcus waiting at the door. The air around them was thick with tension, the unease palpable. "They're getting bolder," Marcus said, his eyes darting around the empty street. "I've been tracking their movements. They're circling, waiting for us to make a mistake." Zane clenched his fists, his mind racing. They had won the battle, but the war, if it could even be called a war, was far from over. The rogues were testing them, looking for any sign of weakness. And Zane couldn't afford to give them that. "We'll deal with them," Zane said, his voice low but firm. "We've fought too long to let them tear us apart now." Marcus nodded, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt. Zane caught it but didn't address it. There was no time for doubt. Not tonight. The pack gathered quickly, their faces serious as they prepared for another fight. The rogues weren't far, and Zane knew they had to act fast before they were caught off guard. His mind was sharp, focused on the battle ahead, but in the back of his thoughts, Delilah lingered like a constant whisper. She was a human, but in some strange way, she had become part of this. The question that plagued him wasn't whether he could win this fight. It was whether he could leave her behind when the battle was over. As the pack moved out, Zane pushed the thought aside, refocusing on the task at hand. The rogues were closing in, and he had no choice but to face them head-on. Later that night, the moon hung high above the city, a silent witness to the unfolding chaos. Zane stood at the edge of the fight, his eyes scanning the surroundings. The battle was fierce, claws slashing through the air, snarls filling the night. His pack was strong, but the rogues were relentless. They fought with a savagery Zane hadn't seen in years, their hunger palpable, as if they were not just fighting to win, but to claim something that Zane didn't understand. In the midst of it all, Zane felt a strange calm wash over him. He had fought countless battles, but this one felt different. It wasn't just about power or survival, it was something deeper. Something that gnawed at him, unsettled him. And in the midst of the chaos, he couldn't help but wonder, what if this was the beginning of the end for all of them? His wolf roared, desperate to break free, to end the battle with one decisive strike. But Zane held back, keeping control. He needed to remain focused. If he lost control now, everything would unravel. A figure emerged from the darkness, one of the rogue alphas, larger than the rest, his eyes glowing with malice. The rogue alpha locked eyes with Zane, his lips pulling back in a predatory grin. Without hesitation, the rogue lunged, and Zane met him head-on, their bodies colliding with a force that rattled the ground beneath them. They fought fiercely, their claws slashing, their teeth snapping, neither giving an inch. The rogue alpha was strong, But Zane had something more, determination. The rogue alpha was wild, driven by bloodlust, but Zane was driven by something else. A need to protect, to save what little remained of his pack. With one final surge of strength, Zane sank his claws deep into the rogue's throat, bringing the fight to an end. The rogue alpha let out a guttural growl, but Zane held his ground until the rogue fell silent. The pack stood victorious once again, their enemies retreating into the shadows. But as Zane caught his breath, something lingered in his chest. It wasn't the satisfaction of victory, it was an emptiness. A question that had been gnawing at him from the inside. Was this the price of survival? Was it worth it? Or had he lost something far more important in the process? Zane had spent his entire life walking the line between his duty as alpha and the chaos of his own emotions. He had built walls around his heart, believing that the pack's survival came first, that sacrifice was the price of leadership. But now, with Delilah standing before him, those walls began to crumble, piece by piece. Her presence had always unsettled him, like a storm waiting to happen, but tonight was different. There was a softness in her eyes, a vulnerability that Zane hadn't seen before. She was here in his world, and for reasons he couldn't explain. He couldn't turn her away. "Zane," Delilah said, her voice a soft tremor in the silence of the night. "I don't understand any of this. Why are you always so distant? Why do you keep pushing me away?" Zane's heart clenched, the weight of her question hanging in the air between them. She was right. He had been pushing her away, keeping her at arm's length, because he couldn't afford the luxury of feelings. His pack, his duty, it was all too much to risk. But standing here with her, so close, it felt impossible to ignore the bond that had started to form between them. He opened his mouth to speak, to give her some semblance of an explanation, but the words felt empty. What could he say? That she didn't belong in his world. That he couldn't afford to get close to her because of the dangers surrounding him. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes locking with hers. "You deserve answers, Delilah," he said, his voice low and raw. "But right now there's so much you don't know. Things I can't explain." Delilah looked at him, confusion flickering across her face. "Then tell me, please. I need to understand." Zane's pulse quickened. The truth was more dangerous than she could imagine. But as her gaze softened, something inside him shifted. She was here, standing in his world, and it seemed as though she had made up her mind to be a part of it, even if she didn't understand the dangers lurking in the shadows. He hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. Could he trust her with this? The bond between them was still fragile, untested. But for some reason, the walls he had spent years building came crashing down as he spoke. "There's a world out there, Delilah. A world you can't see, a world that exists in the shadows. My pack, we're not like humans. We're wolves." The words tasted foreign on his tongue, but they felt more true with each passing second. "We protect this world from the things that threaten it. Things you'll never even know exist." Delilah's eyes widened, and for a moment, Zane thought she would pull away, dismiss him as mad. But she didn't. Instead, she took a step closer, her voice barely a whisper. "You're telling me you're a wolf? Like a werewolf?" Zane nodded slowly, the weight of his confession pressing down on him. "Yes, but it's not just that. There are forces at work, things much bigger than us, and we're fighting a war that never ends. I can't let you get involved in that. It's too dangerous." Delilah stared at him, searching his eyes, as if trying to decide whether she believed him or not. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, each of them holding their breath, unsure of what the other was thinking. "I don't know what to say," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "But I can't walk away from you, Zane. Not now. I need to understand what's happening. I need to know the truth, even if it scares me." The words hit Zane like a jolt of electricity. He had expected her to turn away, to run from the truth, to leave him behind in the world of shadows and lies. But she hadn't. She was standing there, her eyes filled with determination, with trust he didn't feel he deserved. A heavy silence fell between them, and for the first time in a long while, Zane allowed himself to feel something he had kept buried deep inside: hope. But before he could say anything else, a rustling sound broke the moment. Zane's head snapped to the side, his senses going on high alert. His wolf growled low in his chest, urging him to shift, to act. Delilah, sensing the sudden change in him, stepped back, her eyes wide with fear. "What is it? What's happening?" Zane didn't answer her. His focus shifted entirely to the shadows beyond them. The world around them had gone still, too still. He could hear it now, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching, too fast, too heavy to be human. "They're here," Zane muttered under his breath, his voice tense. "The rogues. They're too close." Before Delilah could react, the world erupted into motion. Zane grabbed her arm, pulling her behind him, his body instinctively moving to protect her. The rogues were closing in, their presence like a dark cloud on the horizon, and Zane knew they didn't have much time. "Stay behind me," Zane said, his voice sharp. "Do not move no matter what." Delilah nodded, her face pale but determined. She trusted him. The thought of that trust, of her standing there, unprotected, made Zane's heart beat faster. He couldn't let anything happen to her. He couldn't lose her. Not when everything was starting to fall into place. Suddenly, the rustling grew louder, and then, an unmistakable figure emerged from the shadows. Delilah's breath hitched in her throat as she saw it. Zane. His eyes glowing in the darkness, his body shifting before her very eyes, muscles rippling beneath his skin. She took an involuntary step back, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen him move, seen him fight, but she had never seen him like this. Zane's wolf stood before her, majestic and terrifying, eyes burning with an intensity she couldn't explain. He was no longer the man she had met. He was something ancient, something primal. And in that moment, Delilah realized the truth. Zane was not just a man. He was something more. Her breath caught in her throat as she stepped back, her gaze locked on him, the reality of what he had said sinking in. She had thought she understood, but this was beyond her understanding. And then, as Zane's wolf began to shift back into his human form, Delilah's eyes flickered to the corner of the street, where something caught her attention. For a split second she saw it, a pair of eyes glowing in the darkness, watching them from the shadows, unmoving. A cold chill ran down her spine. She couldn't explain what she had seen, but she knew one thing for sure. Something had just confirmed what Zane had said. There was a world she hadn't known existed, and she was standing right at the edge of it. Zane's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of his world shifted. He had kept his distance, built walls to protect himself and his pack, but now, as Delilah stood before him, there was no turning back. She had seen him, truly seen him. His wolf, his world, and in that moment there was no denying it. The truth had spilled out, uncontained and raw. Her eyes were wide with shock, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. She looked at him, then back to the shadows where the rogue's eyes had gleamed, her mind working to process everything she had just witnessed. The transformation, the supernatural force that Zane had tried so hard to hide from her, now lay bare before her. For a long moment there was silence. A silence thick with uncertainty and fear, with a question that hung in the air. What happens now? Zane could feel the pull between them, the bond they had started to form, but he knew that it was too dangerous. The pack needed him more than ever, and his duty came first. He had made that promise to them long ago, and he couldn't allow his personal feelings to jeopardize their survival. "Delilah," he said, his voice hoarse, "you shouldn't have seen this. You're not part of this world. You're human. You don't belong here." Delilah's eyes, wide with disbelief, never left his face. "But I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. You're a wolf. A werewolf. How long have you been hiding this from me? Why didn't you tell me?" Zane ran a hand through his hair, frustration tightening his jaw. He could feel the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him, could hear the distant calls of his pack echoing in his mind, their needs, their fear. The rogues were still out there, the threat never truly gone, and now Delilah knew. She knew everything. "I didn't want you to get involved," Zane said, his words cutting through the night. "You're not part of this world, Delilah. You can't be. I can't afford to let you be part of it." Delilah stepped forward, her gaze steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I don't care what world I'm part of," she said fiercely. "I don't care that you're a wolf. Care about you. I care about what we have, what we could have. I won't turn away, Zane. Not now." Zane shook his head, his chest tight. "This isn't a choice, Delilah. You're not just some human I can walk away from. My pack needs me, and I can't risk your life or mine, because of some bond one can't explain." Delilah's face softened, but her determination never wavered. "What's more important to you, Zane? Your pack or me?" She paused, her voice almost a whisper. "What happens if the pack doesn't understand? What if they don't accept me? What then?" He stared at her, torn between his feelings and the reality of his pack's needs. The weight of his position as alpha had always been clear, but now, with Delilah standing before him, the lines between duty and desire blurred. His pack was on the brink of collapse, the rogues growing bolder. His every decision affected their survival, and the path he took now would either strengthen or destroy everything he had fought for. "They want a wolf bloodline," Zane said, his voice cold and harsh. "Not a human. They need someone who can fight beside them, someone who has the strength and the legacy to lead them. That's not you, Delilah. And I can't put you in the middle of this. My pack needs me more than you do." A flash of pain crossed Delilah's face, but she didn't back down. Instead, she stepped closer to him, her voice trembling with conviction. "Then I'll stay," she said, her words simple but powerful. "I won't leave you. I'm not afraid, Zane. I'm not running from you or the truth. If you want me to go, you'll have to make me." Zane's breath caught in his throat, her words cutting through the fog of uncertainty. Her refusal to leave, her insistence on standing by him, shook him to his core. He had never expected her to fight for him, not like this. She had been thrust into this world against her will, yet here she was, refusing to back down. For the first time in what felt like forever, Zane allowed himself to truly feel the weight of the moment. The bond between them wasn't just some fleeting attraction. It was something deeper, something real. But Zane knew that the cost of that bond was more than he could bear. He had to protect her. He had to protect them all. His pack, his people, everything he had ever known. His responsibility as alpha would always come first, and that meant keeping Delilah safe, even if it meant pushing her away. "I can't do this," Zane whispered, the words breaking him inside. "You don't understand what's at stake here, Delilah. My pack is everything. You can't be part of it. You can't stay. But Delilah's eyes never wavered, never softened. She took another step forward, closing the distance between them. I'm not going anywhere, Zane. You don't get to decide that for me. If I'm part of your world, I'm in it for good. Whether you want me here or not. Zane's heart raced. His emotions tangled in a knot of fear and longing. But as he looked into her eyes, something inside him shifted. Maybe he wasn't the only one who had a choice to make. I can't promise you anything, he said softly, his voice breaking. But I won't run from this anymore. I won't push you away. The air between them seemed to crackle, the unspoken words hanging in the tension that bound them together. Delilah smiled softly, her hand reaching up to touch his cheek, the simple gesture almost more than Zane could bear. And then, as the moment seemed to stretch on forever, a soft sound echoed from the shadows, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Zane's wolf growled deep in his throat, sensing the danger before it arrived. Delilah didn't seem to notice at first, but when she looked up, her expression shifted. She felt it too. From the corner of her eye, she saw something, someone moving in the shadows. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks, but then the figure stepped forward, its eyes glowing in the darkness. Zane froze, his instincts kicking in. The air shifted, thick with the tension of a threat that Delilah hadn't fully understood yet. Before she could ask, the figure stepped forward, its outline taking shape in the dim light. And in that instant Delilah realized, this wasn't just a man. This wasn't just a wolf. It was something far more dangerous. And for the first time, Delilah understood just how deep she was about to get pulled into the world of shadows Zane had tried to protect her from. The tension had been building for days, a quiet storm threatening to break. Zane had done his best to focus on the pack's needs, but every moment with Delilah seemed to pull him further from the world he knew, further from the responsibilities he had sworn to uphold. The bond between them had only grown stronger, and though he pushed her away, the pull he felt toward her was undeniable. But now something had shifted, something dangerous. Another pack had noticed their closeness, one that had been quietly fighting for dominance over Zane's territory. They had always been a distant threat, but now it seemed they were targeting Zane in a way they hadn't before. They had seen the bond forming between Zane and Delilah, and they were ready to use it against him. Zane was walking the quiet streets, his thoughts still tangled in his recent encounters with Delilah, when he heard it. Footsteps too heavy and too fast. His instincts flared. They weren't human. Before he could react, two men leapt from the shadows, their eyes glowing with malice, their faces twisted with a hunger for chaos. Zane immediately shifted, his body transforming into his wolf form in the blink of an eye. His teeth bared and claws extended. "Delilah," he roared, but it was too late. They had already closed the distance, and one of them grabbed her, pulling her into the shadows. Delilah screamed, her voice laced with fear, but Zane was already moving. His body, still not fully shifted, was slower than usual, and the rogue attackers were fast, merciless. One of them slashed across his side with brutal force, and Zane let out a growl of pain, the blood trickling down his fur. He couldn't let them take her. He couldn't lose her. With every ounce of strength he had left, Zane charged forward, knocking one of the attackers off balance. The rogue stumbled back, but there were still two more. Zane was outnumbered, and his wounds were slowing him down. "Delilah, get out of here!" Zane shouted, trying to hold his ground, but the words barely escaped his mouth before the second attacker lunged. He fought back with everything he had, but the attackers were relentless, a coordinated assault meant to bring him to the ground. Zane's vision blurred from the pain, and just as he thought he couldn't go on, he heard it, the sound of footsteps of more wolves. Delilah, her face pale with fear, had pulled out her phone. She had called Zane's pack. Seconds later, the ground seemed to shake as Zane's pack arrived. His brothers, his wolves, shifted from their human forms into their full wolf shape, charging in with a fierce and coordinated assault. But it was too late. Zane had already taken a hit. His injuries, though not fatal, had left him struggling to keep up with the fight. The battle became a blur, the rogues now facing the full force of Zane's pack. The air was thick with the sounds of snarls and growls, the clash of fur against fur. Zane's wolves quickly overwhelmed the attackers, but the damage was done. Zane had been injured, and they had all seen the true extent of the fight. Delilah watched from the side, her heart in her throat as the wolves tore into the attackers. Her eyes locked with Zane's for a split second, and in that moment she saw it. She saw the raw power of the wolves, the fierce loyalty they had to one another, and the reality of Zane's world. Zane's pack finally took down the last of the attackers, and the remaining rogues fled, knowing they couldn't win. But the damage had already been done. Zane's pack gathered around him, their eyes filled with concern and urgency. Zane's wolf was struggling to stay on his feet, but Delilah rushed to him, kneeling by his side. "You're hurt," she said, her voice trembling, panic evident in her eyes. "I'll be fine," Zane said through gritted teeth, but the pain was clear on his face. He was exhausted, his body battered from the fight, and the injuries were starting to take their toll. One of Zane's pack members, Marcus, stepped forward, his face grim. "We need to get him back to the warehouse. Fast." As they moved, Zane's pack shifted back into their human forms, the air around them heavy with tension. Delilah was still beside Zane, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the wolves around her. She had seen Zane transform before, but to witness his pack shift together, to see the power and unity they shared, it was something else entirely. Delilah's heart raced as she realized the full scope of what she had just witnessed. This wasn't some strange dream, some fantasy. This was real. Zane's world was real. And in some unexplainable way, she was now part of it. Zane's pack helped him to the warehouse, but as they settled him down, the weight of what had just happened began to settle over them all. The rogues were a real threat, but there was something else in the air, an unspoken understanding that Delilah had crossed a line. She had seen too much. And Zane's pack was starting to understand that the human woman who had been so close to their alpha wasn't just some bystander. Delilah had seen them in their full form. She had witnessed their power. Zane's pack stood around them, their expressions unreadable. Delilah's presence in their world was no longer a secret. And now they all had to reckon with the truth. Zane, Derek, the pack's elder, spoke, his voice heavy. "She's human. She doesn't belong here." Zane looked up at his pack, the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. "She stays," he said, his voice firm, even though the rest of him felt uncertain. "She stays with me." Delilah looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest, the gravity of the situation hitting her in full force. She wasn't just in Zane's world anymore. She was part of it, whether she wanted to be or not. And as Zane's pack watched her closely, she realized just how deep she had gotten drawn into this world of shadows, power, and danger. There was no turning back now. The tension in the warehouse was palpable. Zane, his body covered in fresh wounds, sat slumped against the wall, his pack members gathering around him. They had taken down the rogue attackers, but it wasn't a victory they could fully celebrate. Delilah stood to the side, still reeling from what she had just witnessed. The wolves, Zane's transformation, the fight. Her world had shifted irrevocably, in a matter of moments. She was still trying to process everything. Zane, his pack, the power, the danger. She had never imagined anything like this, yet here she was, standing at the heart of it, pulled into a world she didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Zane's breathing was shallow, the weight of the injury he'd sustained taking its toll on him. He needed rest, but his mind was far from any notion of peace. He couldn't stop thinking about Delilah and the implications of what had just happened. She had seen everything. There was no going back. His pack knew, and soon the whole world around them would have to reckon with the human woman who had become too close to their alpha. Marcus, one of Zane's most trusted pack members, stood in the corner, watching the scene unfold. "Zane," he said, his voice steady, but there was an undercurrent of concern. "This isn't just about your fight anymore. You've seen too much. Your bond with her, it's not just a distraction anymore. It's a liability." Zane's jaw tightened, the words hitting him harder than he expected. He knew that was the truth. Delilah had seen them in their full form, had witnessed their power, and now she was part of their world whether he liked it or not. But to push her away now, it felt wrong. "You're right," Zane said, his voice low, but there was something unshakable in his tone. He looked over at Delilah, who stood against the wall, her eyes filled with a mix of fear, confusion, and something else, something that seemed like trust. "He stays with me, no matter what you all think." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Zane's pack members exchanged looks, their eyes flicking between Zane and Delilah. Derek, the eldest of the pack, stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of the entire room. "You know we can't just ignore the consequences of this," Derek said. His voice was grave, but there was no judgment in his eyes. "The rogues are already a problem. And now we have a human, you're human, seeing everything, being a part of what we do. This isn't just about you and her anymore. This affects us all." Zane clenched his fists, the frustration and the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "I'm not asking you to understand, but she's not going anywhere. And she's not a liability. She's part of this now." Delilah, who had been standing silently, took a tentative step forward. Her voice was steady, despite the chaos inside her. "I won't leave. I'm not afraid of this world. Not anymore." Her words, spoken with such conviction, surprised everyone in the room. Zane's heart skipped a beat. He knew Delilah was strong, stronger than she realized, but hearing her say that, it made him feel something he wasn't ready to confront. "I don't want to be just a part of your world, Zane," Delilah continued, her eyes locking with his. "I want to be by your side. I want to help. I know I can't fight like you, but there has to be a way I can be of use. I won't run. Not from you. Not from this." Zane swallowed hard, his mind reeling. The bond between them was undeniable, but the risk, the danger she now faced, it was more than he could bear. His pack needed him. He couldn't afford to lose focus. "You don't understand," he said softly, his voice strained. "This world, it's dangerous. The rogues will come again, and if we're not careful, we'll lose everything. And I can't." "You're not losing me," Delilah interrupted, her voice fierce and steady. "I won't be the reason you lose everything. I won't be the one who holds you back." Zane's breath caught in his chest, the intensity of her words locking him in place. How could she be so certain, so willing to stand by him, even when her world was crashing down around her? But Delilah had made up her mind. She wasn't leaving. And something deep inside Zane told him that, no matter how much he tried to push her away, she wasn't going anywhere. Before he could respond, a distant howl cut through the air. It wasn't the same howl they had heard earlier in the fight. This one was closer. Too close. Zane's head snapped toward the door, his senses going on high alert. "They're back," Marcus said, his voice tense. "We've been discovered." The pack members immediately shifted into their wolves, their bodies moving fluidly in a choreographed dance of strength and precision. Zane's wolf surged to the forefront, the familiar power coursing through him. He stood tall, his body already prepared for battle. But as his pack moved into position, Zane's focus shifted back to Delilah. She was standing near the edge of the room, her eyes wide, taking in everything with a mix of fear and determination. She had already seen so much, but now she would see even more. The real danger. Zane moved toward her, his eyes filled with an unspoken plea. "Get inside. Stay close to me. Don't." But before he could finish, the door slammed open, and two more figures appeared, stepping into the warehouse. Their eyes gleamed with malice, rogues again. And they weren't alone. Their pack was with them. Zane's pack had been outnumbered before, but this time the odds were worse. Delilah gasped as the attackers closed in. Her instincts screamed for her to run, but she couldn't. She wouldn't leave Zane. One of the rogues lunged at Zane, a blur of movement, and the two collided with brutal force. Zane was strong, but the rogue was fast, and this time there was no escaping the pain. Zane's wolf took over, pushing the rogue off, but not before a brutal swipe left a gash on his side. "Zane!" Delilah cried out, her voice cutting through the chaos. But Zane's pack was there in an instant. The rest of his wolves shifted, charging forward to assist their alpha. They tore into the rogues, the fight raging with a ferocity Zane hadn't seen in weeks. But as much as they fought, they were still outnumbered. Zane's injuries slowed him, his movements becoming more labored with each passing second. Delilah, refusing to stay back, picked up a weapon she could find and ran toward Zane. She didn't know how to fight, but the sight of him struggling, the pack struggling, drove her to action. She managed to get close enough to one of the rogues, striking him with a piece of metal she had found. It distracted him just long enough for Zane to regain his footing and fight back. The rogue, stunned by the blow, was quickly overtaken by Zane's pack. With their combined strength, the remaining rogues were driven out of the warehouse. But the damage had already been done. Zane, bloodied and exhausted, turned toward Delilah, his eyes locking with hers. His pack had learned something that they couldn't ignore now. She wasn't just a bystander. She was part of Zane's world. And as Zane's pack stared at the human woman standing beside their alpha, they realized something more. She wasn't just standing by Zane. She was with him. The weight of the world seemed to press down on Zane with every passing minute. The quiet hum of the city outside the warehouse could not drown out the chaos brewing within. The rogue pack had not only attacked them but had seen firsthand the bond between Zane and Delilah, an alliance that was becoming more than just a matter of personal attachment. It was a risk, one that Zane's pack wasn't sure they could afford. Zane sat in the dimly lit room, his hands clenched tightly in his lap, his eyes staring into nothingness. Delilah was beside him, her presence a comfort, yet also a reminder of the path they were walking together, one that seemed to be growing more perilous with every passing day. He could feel the strain in her every glance, in the subtle way her shoulders tensed when the pack spoke, or when a new decision had to be made. She had no idea how deep this world ran, how dangerous it could be. She couldn't possibly understand the sacrifices Zane had made, the walls he had built to protect them all. He had always been an alpha, strong, decisive, unwavering in the face of adversity. But now that certainty felt fragile. Every decision felt like a betrayal, to his pack, to Delilah, to the future of everything he had fought to build. "You're still thinking about it," Delilah said softly, her voice a gentle pull from his spiraling thoughts. Zane glanced at her, his chest tightening. She was so much stronger than he gave her credit for. In every moment of uncertainty, she stood by him. But the cost of that loyalty was beginning to feel too great. "The attack," Zane started, his words trailing off. "They're not going to stop. The rogues, the pack that attacked you, they're planning to come for us again. They want revenge, Delilah." She nodded, her eyes never leaving his face. "No. Can feel it too. They won't back down until they get what they want." Zane let out a long breath, his body tense. "I can't let you get hurt again. I can't risk losing you." Delilah's gaze softened, but she didn't back away. "I'm not afraid of them. I'm with you, Zane. I've made my choice." But Zane's mind was elsewhere. He couldn't shake the thought that every time he made a decision for the pack, it came at the expense of her safety. The fractures within his pack were becoming more evident every day, and his loyalty to them was now being questioned. Some of his wolves had already begun to whisper, their patience wearing thin. They were tired. They were tired of the secrecy, of the strain, of being led by a man torn between two worlds. They wanted an alpha who could lead without hesitation, someone who could put the pack first. His pack wanted him to choose, and that was a choice Zane didn't know how to make. Later that evening, the meeting room was filled with tension. The pack had gathered, their eyes flicking between Zane and each other, their faces a mixture of frustration and uncertainty. The latest attack had done more than just damage their territory. It had exposed cracks in their leadership. Zane could feel it in the way they looked at him. Appraising, questioning. They didn't trust him as they once had, and they didn't know if they could anymore. His bond with Delilah had become a point of contention, a liability. Derek, the elder wolf, was the first to speak. His voice calm but heavy with the weight of his words. "Zane, we've fought long and hard. But this is not the way forward. Your bond with her," Derek nodded toward Delilah, "has already put us in jeopardy. The rogues will come again, and we can't afford to have our alpha distracted. The pack needs someone who can lead without hesitation. We need someone who will put us first." Zane felt the sting of his words like a slap to the face. His pack, his family, was questioning his leadership. Delilah's presence had become an anchor for him, a place of safety he hadn't realized he needed, but in doing so, he had lost the trust of his wolves. "What are you suggesting, Derek?" Zane's voice was low, a threat just beneath the surface. His anger flared, but he kept it in check. "That I choose between her and the pack. That I turn my back on everything I've built." "We're not asking you to turn your back on her," Derek said, his tone firm. "But your first duty is to us, Zane. To the pack. We can't follow an alpha who's torn between two worlds. We need an alpha who can lead, who will put the pack's survival above all else." A murmur ran through the pack members. Zane could feel their eyes on him, the weight of their doubt pressing down on him like 1,000 pounds. His heart raced, but his voice remained steady. "So what? You think I should step down? You think you can do better?" The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. No one spoke, but the tension was palpable. Zane could feel the shift in the air, the growing divide. His pack was no longer the unified force it once was. They had seen him hesitate, seen him falter, and now they questioned his ability to lead them. It was too much. The pack was slipping from his grasp, and with it, everything he had fought for. Before anyone could respond, the door to the warehouse slammed open, and Marcus, one of Zane's closest allies, stepped inside. His face was grim, his breath coming in heavy gasps. "They're moving," Marcus said, his voice urgent. "The rogues. They've already started gathering. They'll be here soon." The room went silent. All eyes turned toward Zane. The pack's survival was on the line, and his leadership was no longer a matter of personal choice. It was a matter of survival. Zane's heart clenched. The attack had come too soon, too fast. There was no time to waste. He turned to his pack, his voice commanding as it always had been, but now with a quiet desperation. "Get ready. We fight. No more hesitation." Outside, the night was eerily still. Zane and his pack prepared for the oncoming fight, their bodies shifting into their wolf forms with practiced ease. But Zane felt the weight of the moment more heavily than he had in years. His pack was divided, his leadership questioned, and Delilah, his one source of clarity, was now in the thick of the battle. Could he protect her in this world? Delilah stood by his side, her eyes wide but resolute. She had seen the full extent of what Zane's world entailed, and though it terrified her, she wasn't backing down. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, her hand gripping his. Zane turned to her, his wolf urging him to protect her at all costs. But he couldn't afford that luxury. Not now, not when everything was hanging by a thread. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice softer now. "Promise me." She nodded, but Zane saw the fire in her eyes. She wasn't afraid, and that made her more dangerous than anyone could have predicted. The rogue pack would come soon, and when they did, Zane knew the price of loyalty would be tested. This fight wasn't just about survival. It was about something much bigger. The pack, Delilah, his heart. Everything was on the line, and Zane would have to make a choice. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a dim glow over the warehouse as Zane and his pack prepared for the coming storm. The rogue pack was closing in, their movements more calculated now, and the air was thick with tension. Zane's wolf, ever restless, paced inside him, but there was something else gnawing at him. Voice. A decision that could change everything. Delilah stood beside him, her face set with determination, but there was an unmistakable trace of worry in her eyes. She had been with him through so much, had fought by his side in ways no one expected, and yet Zane couldn't shake the feeling that whatever came next could tear them apart. They had barely caught their breath after the last attack when word came through from an unlikely source. A healer who had been traveling between packs, someone who had seen many battles and had heard whispers about a cure. A cure for the hybrid condition, a way to bridge the gap between humans and wolves without the risk of destroying one or the other. The rumor spread quickly through Zane's pack, though no one was sure how true it was. The healer spoke of an ancient spell, one that could merge human and wolf bloodlines. It could change Delilah's fate, transform her into something more than just a human but not fully wolf. The cure, however, came with risks, grave risks. If the spell didn't align with her soul, she could die. And if it did work, she would no longer be human but would live as something in between. The cure was too tempting. It offered a way for Delilah to truly belong in Zane's world. No more hiding. No more risking her life every time they faced a new enemy. But it also came with an unbearable weight, the fear that the cure might fail, and Delilah could be lost forever. The question was no longer just about Delilah's survival. It was about everything that had been building between Zane and his pack. Zane had always put his pack first. Always. But now there was Delilah. Someone who had unknowingly slipped under his skin, someone whose presence was now more vital to him than he could ever have imagined. Earlier that evening, before they heard about the cure, Zane stood with Derek, Marcus, and the others. They were making plans, preparing for the attack they knew was coming. The rogues had made it clear they weren't done. Zane's pack had barely caught its breath before whispers began circulating about a cure, something that could change the course of everything. Zane, Derek's voice was low but firm, his eyes studying him with an intensity that only came from years of leadership. The pack needs you. But we also need to know where you stand. This cure, it could change everything for Delilah. For all of us. Zane shifted uneasily. The weight of his responsibility as Alpha pressed down on him harder than ever. Delilah's life was in his hands, and so was the survival of the pack. If he let the cure change her, it would mean a deeper commitment to her, but it could also mean losing everything he had built. I'm not sure if this cure is a blessing or a curse, Zane said, his voice tight with uncertainty. The consequences are too great. What if it doesn't work? What if she's lost forever? Marcus spoke up, his voice blunt. We're running out of time, Zane. The rogues are coming. They won't wait for us to figure this out. You're either going to fight for your pack, or you're going to risk everything for her. You can't keep playing both sides. Zane clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to lash out. But Marcus was right. The pack was fractured. Some of them believed Delilah's presence was a liability. Others saw her as an anchor that kept Zane human, something the pack needed now more than ever. I'm not abandoning her, Zane said through gritted teeth. But I won't put my pack at risk either. The next day, Delilah stood alone, staring out at the horizon. She had heard the whispers, heard the talk about the cure, about the risks. Her thoughts were a tangled mess. Part of her wanted to take the chance, to let Zane's world be her world too. But the other part, the part that loved him, that cared for him deeply, was afraid. Afraid that if she went through with it, she might lose herself. She might lose everything. Zane had always put his pack first. Always. But now, with the thought of the cure hanging between them, she realized something deeper. The cure wasn't just about her. It was about Zane too. He was torn between his duty to her and his duty to his pack. Delilah! Zane's voice broke through her thoughts, soft and steady. She turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat. There was so much unsaid between them, so much that had been left to linger in the silence. I'm not sure what to do, Zane admitted, his voice raw with uncertainty. I don't want to lose you, but I'm afraid of what this cure might cost. Delilah took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she stepped toward him. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. I'm not running from you, Zane. I'm with you. Zane's heart clenched. He had never known this kind of uncertainty, this kind of fear. But with Delilah by his side, maybe, just maybe, they could make it through. Together. But the question still loomed. What if the cure didn't work? What if it was the wrong decision? That night, as the wind howled outside, Zane and Delilah sat in silence, the weight of their choices settling over them like a thick fog. The rogue pack was preparing to strike. Zane could feel it in his bones. The storm was coming, and this time they might not make it out unscathed. His pack had grown restless, and the fractures were becoming more obvious. Some of them still questioned his decisions. Others wanted a new alpha, someone who would lead them without hesitation. Zane couldn't ignore it any longer. His pack wanted him to make a choice. Delilah or them. The pack, it seemed, was growing tired of the uncertainty. They wanted a leader who wouldn't falter. A leader who could lead them through the chaos without hesitation. And Delilah was caught in the middle. As Zane prepared his pack for the upcoming battle, his thoughts remained with Delilah. Could he truly protect her in this world? Could he fight for both the pack and the woman he loved? The questions ate at him, and as the moon rose high in the sky, Zane knew that everything was about to change. The battle with the rogues would be the turning point, the moment when they would either be broken apart or forged stronger than ever. The rogues would come soon, but when the dust settled, Zane would have to make a choice. And that choice would determine not only his future but the future of everything he had ever known. The story ends with Zane standing on the precipice of a decision. The future uncertain, the past holding on by a thread. What will Zane choose? Will he risk everything for Delilah, or will he put his pack first? When will the rogue pack strike? And how much will Zane be willing to sacrifice to protect his world? And, more importantly, will Zane still be the alpha? Will his pack grow stronger or crumble under the weight of their uncertainty? Only time will tell.
Like, share and subscribe to show the author support and love.